Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, the Education Department is firm about the reopening of school in August, but with COVID-19 cases continuing to rise, are teachers and students prepared to return to in-person classes? And what are the concerns of private schools if they will go 100% face-to-face? Private Education Assistance Committee Executive Director Doris Ferrer and Teachers Dignity Coalition Chairperson Benjo Basas join us live. Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte is firm about opening the upcoming school year in August, despite some calls to suspend it. Duterte says she's ready to talk with different groups, but the government can no longer delay the resumption of face-to-face classes in November to prevent learning loss.
Ng school year natin ay na-approve na po ng Pangulo. Tuloy na po tayo. Napresenta na po ito doon sa unang-unang cabinet meeting natin. Ito po yung pinakaunang tinanong ng ating Pangulo sa Department of Education. Nag-present na po kami, nag-cite po kami ng mga research papers to support our position na magsimula tayo mag-transition to 5 days in-person classes.
The Coordinating Council of Private Educational Association of the Philippines, or COCOPEA, meanwhile, has formally filed an appeal for DepEd to lift the ban on hybrid or blended learning starting November 2.
The private education sector is not against face-to-face classes, but we are just appealing for us to be given flexibility in delivering other platforms that support face-to-face classes. I think it would be ideal if we separate the transition policies in the private education sector from the public school system, because we have very different policy environments. We cater to different students, and again, the platforms were differently implemented during the past 2 years.
Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Private Education Assistance Committee Executive Director Doris Ferrer. Doris, welcome to the source. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Pinky. Good morning. Good morning to all the viewers of the source. Good morning.
So for the most part, we speak to COCOPEA. This is actually the first time I'm speaking to you as director, or executive director rather, of the Private Education Assistance Committee. First, tell us more about your group.
The PEAC actually co-implements with the Department of Education, the Junior High School Education Service Contracting Program, which has about 1 million grantees, and then the Senior High School Voucher Program, which again has about 1 million grantees. So in effect, when we say that does government support the private education sector, the answer is a yes, because these are very concrete subsidy programs that are being implemented by the Department of Education and by government.
Okay, so to be clear, the opening of classes on August 22, you do not see a problem with that?
We do not see a problem with that. In fact, some of the private schools will open in July, and we're very happy about the certainty of the school opening on August 22.
Is this long awaited?
Well, for private schools, they've always, of course, operated very, every school year, we know exactly when to open, when to close. We have that, that flexibility, when to open 1 month before, a certain period. That is all provided for. But we're also we're very happy about the fact that there is clarity from the Department of Education insofar as the school opening of the public schools are concerned. Because sometimes, there is always that comparison among families, when public and private do not open just about the same time.
Right. And I think I have to agree with you that the confusion, at least in that regard, has been, is clearer now with the announcement of the Department of Education. So let's talk about this. There are 3 options prior to the full implementation of face-to-face classes. One would be definitely full face-to-face by November 2. The other one is full online or prior to November 2, or 3 weeks, 3 times a week face-to-face, 2 days online, and eventually 4 days face-to-face, 1 day online, and then the full 5 days. Right now, with the opening of classes of private schools, what would be, you say, the option that will be taken by the majority of the schools?
At the moment, the PAC is conducting a survey. Now we're calling it the research survey on learning recovery in private secondary education schools, because these are the ones who are beneficiaries of the GASPE program. Therefore, easy for us to reach them. Now, having said that, the options that have been given by DepEd are exactly the options that have been operational in the last several years. The only thing that was not present was the reopening of schools and the resumption of in-person classes, which was piloted in the previous school year. But now DepEd is saying that they're okay to reopening classes. And to us, that is welcome news as well, because since day one, we've actually said that we should be safely reopening our schools, but not necessarily 5 days of in-person. What does that mean? If you do blended delivery, then you have 3 days of in-person, 2 days at home for online distance or modular distance, or some other modality which will combine in-person with other remote modalities. So in effect, what we're saying is that we support the reopening of the schools. We support the resumption of in-person classes, in-person instruction, because we know that nothing really beats, especially for the early grades, being in person with your teacher. But other modalities, which we already have utilized in the last 2 school years, which we call the COVID school years, should still be harnessed, should still be utilized, because we've seen the advantages that can be brought about by other modalities other than the traditional in-person.
But do you support the implementation of full face-to-face classes by November 2?
Okay, that is the part which we'd like to discuss with DepEd. Therefore, we have been in discussions as well with COCOPEA. We understand where COCOPEA is coming from. The 3 biggest reasons. Number 1, of course, we'd like to support quality education. I mean, every one of us is concerned about the learning losses and the learning gaps. But we don't think that the online platforms are we can completely attribute to online distance or remote modalities the decline in learning among our students. The PISA results in 2019 actually came out with us being at the bottom even before COVID-19. So we understand where COCOPEA is coming from, and many of the private schools are also most concerned about that, because yes, we're concerned with quality, but we think that it cannot be just 5 days in person from November 2. We also would like to respect our parents as are very important stakeholders, of course, in private schools. And just to tell, some parents have already reached out to us and saying that they've had orientations already in their schools. They already know that it will be a blended modality that will be used by the schools. And that's already the contract between the schools and the parents. So that is something that within the school year cannot be all of a sudden changed. And then third, we also would like to say that, with the rise of COVID cases, and we'd like to make sure that if ever there'll be surges and we'll go back to lockdowns, we still have the other modalities that will continue the learning despite possible lockdowns.
Let's look into what you were saying, especially with number 1, the contract. I guess what is being discussed here is that upon enrollment, the parents know or are made to understand that when they enroll their children, that this would be a blended type of learning. Is that correct?
Yes, we've had, of course, some parents telling us that. However, I heard the interview of VP Sara yesterday saying that among the low-income families, in person is really the most advantageous modality. And we tend to agree because the home environment may not be as conducive, no, as those in, say, middle income families for students to
Agree.
learn
Mm-mm.
uninterrupted, okay, inside their homes.
So, okay, so, but because there is such a contract or there is an agreement, let's call it that, between the parents and the school, that the coming school year would be some sort of a hybrid in person and online. Do you see any problems or any legal problems that may occur because of the mandate for now, that by November 2, it must be a full implementation of face-to-face?
Yeah, I still am hopeful, no, that we can discuss this matter with DepEd. It is possible that the 5 days that is, in the department orders that, every single day the school should be open. Every single day you should have learners. If that is the interpretation, then that's doable, because across grade levels, no, we know that as a matter of fact, you cannot have all of them reporting to school all at the same time if you want to ensure that there's physical distance, and you have to make sure that your class sizes are such that they will allow some distance, and all the provisions are in place. So if that's how it can be interpreted, then I don't think we will have any problem with that. Just a matter
Yeah,
of
but
just making sure that we're on the same page with the Department of
Yeah, but
Education.
that's the thing. When it comes to physical distancing, it is not a requirement. However, it is encouraged. So let's talk about private schools where possibly physical distancing would be possibly easier to implement than public schools. I read that a ratio should be about 35 students per classroom. Run us through, for example, the situation in private schools. How many students are there on an average in a classroom?
I suppose that on average, that's about 35 to 40. You have private schools with smaller, class sizes, but on average, it should be about 35 to even 14 or even 45. Uh, as regards physical distance, no, and all that, and the safety protocols that will have to be in place. When private schools venture into in person schooling, we definitely will be very concerned about making sure that these protocols are in place, because it's really not just about the liabilities or just the legal aspects. It's really
Yeah.
concern for the same child, our student and the parent's child, to ensure that all safety protocols are in place.
And with a rise in COVID cases, not just
Yes.
obviously in the country, but worldwide, you see that even in South Korea and some European countries. How big of a concern is that right now with this kind of directive coming into the opening of classes on August 22, and that implementation, the full implementation of face-to-face? But I think it's also good to note here that that is the decision for now. But it seems
Yes.
with the interview of Vice President Sara Duterte as Education Secretary, and sinasabi niya, for now, yan ang napag-uusapan. But there is somehow this understanding that it could change depending on what we will see in the next weeks or even months.
Right, Pinky. Kaya nga, no, if you really want to be resilient about this, we should be prepared for full online or full remote in case there's a lockdown. And at the same time, we also should be ready for, say, in person with safety protocols in place. Meaning, whatever happens in terms of the fluidity of the health situation, our schools can respond. That's why in the last 2 years, PAC has been training teachers and administrators on what we call as flexible modalities. It's actually an entire spectrum, no, from full in person to full online. But we're
Yeah.
not believers of either, no, especially for the early grades. It will have to be a
Yeah.
combination of online, whether synchronous or asynchronous, and then in person. So that's
But
actually how the
such
private schools have been looking at it now.
Yeah, but being able to adapt to certain situations, would you say, Doris, that this would come easier for the students and even the schools because of the 2 years of the pandemic?
I think so, yes. That's why this survey that we're doing now, about 1,000 schools have already responded, and in August we'll have the results. No, we actually asked them, what modality did you actually use in the last 2 years? How have you, how have you tracked, the progress
Mm-mm.
of your students? Especially because it's really been extraordinary, the last 2 years. And when we get answers to these questions, including the last question on what programs and policies should be in place, so that you can be better supported. Given that, this is how it will be. I mean, this is not the first and last time, I suppose, that we will have something as disastrous as COVID-19. Or at the same time, we also think about, integrating technology in the teaching learning process. With or without COVID, we would have wanted
Okay.
that, right? As part of our efforts to be globally competitive.
Doris, just as a last question, could there be an impact on this, the August 22 opening? Sasama ko na rin yung plan of full implementation of face-to-face by November 2. Again, my question is, would this somehow impact the enrollment of this school year?
I also heard anecdotally that some parents have said, teka lang, hindi pa kami sure kung mag-e-enroll na ba kami talaga kasi ano ba talaga ang modality na gagamitin nyo this school year. Of course, it has impact, say, on school fees. It will have impact on schedules, on faculty loading, etc. So the part of having, say, a November 2 supposed directive that it will have to all
Target.
go to full 5 days, that is the thing that is rather problematic, in the DO. But the rest, we're very supportive. August 22 opening, relaxing all the requirements for private schools to do in person, the various modalities that can be used in the first several months. But that November 2, provision is something that we intend to discuss the soonest with DepEd, to our mind, before the opening of private schools, some of them by the 30th of July. There has to be more clarity about it.
We hope that happens soon. Private Education Assistance Committee Executive Director Doris Ferrer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we will be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Teachers Dignity Coalition Chairperson Benjo Basas. Benjo, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Okay, Benjo, umpisahan na natin yung opening of classes ng August 22. Meron ba kayo nakikitang problema dito? Or is this good? Kaya mo ba?
Kaya po kung kaya, no? Hindi naman po kami tumatanggi, no? Doon sa paggampan sa tungkulin. Pero meron po kaming nakikita na dalawang pinakamalaking issues po dito, no? Unang-una ay inaalis, no, yung karapatan ng ating mga teachers, no, doon sa school break, no? We have mandated by law, no, meron sana po kaming at least 60 days, no, na school break, no. Yan yung alternative ng gobyerno dahil hindi naman binibigyan, no, ng sick leave at vacation leave yung mga teachers, no. So yun po, no, yun yung napaka-importante po niyan, no, at hindi yan tungkol lamang, no, sa aming pahinga, no. Ito ay tungkol sa aming karapatan, no, na mabigyan, no, nitong quality time, no, to rest, of course, and more importantly, no, to prepare, no, physically, emotionally, and mentally, no, doon sa pagpasok ng bagong school year. Kaya po yun yung rationale, no. At ito yung tradition, no, and beyond tradition, no, ito po ay ginagalang po, established po ito, no, under sa batas, no, under the existing rules ng civil service, no, and even ng Magna Carta for Public School Teachers, no, at iba pang ng mga panuntunan, hindi lang ng civil service, pati ng Department of Education. For the longest time po, it has been observed, no, pero ngayon po, no, dahil dito po sa nilabas, no, ng ating mahal na kalihim, no, na Department Order, no, 34, ay mawawala po ito, no, practically, no. Siguro banggitin ko lang, no, Ma'am Pinky, no, na natapos officially yung klase, no, nung June 24, but up until now po, no, meron pa ring mga teachers tayo na pinagre-report, no, sa kanilang mga eskwelahan, no, for different purposes po, no. At magpapatuloy po 'yan, no, hanggang August, no. Hanggang mag-overlap na yung trabaho ng teachers, no, na sangkot pa, no, yung school year 2021-2022 hanggang papasok na po yung
Benjo,
activities, no, for the opening
bakit
of classes.
bakit pinababalik yung mga guro after ng ending ng school year noong June 24? What's the reason for this?
Yes, ma'am, no. Meron po tayong iba't ibang mga gawain, no. Like yung June 24 po, no, is the end of classes. No po, after po ng end of classes, meron po kaming tinatawag po na end of school year activities, no. Kabilang po diyan yung pag-aayos ng mga graduation, ano, yung araw-araw pa pinababalik yung mga teacher na hanggang in some cases po, no, up to July 1, no, yung iba naman up to July 8, no, at yung iba hanggang July 16. No, ganyan po, no, dahil marami pa pong kinakailang i-accomplish, no. At kabilang din po dito yung pag-aayos ng performance rating, no, na araw-araw pinababalik pa rin yung mga teachers po natin, ano, at kinakailangan gumawa ng iba't ibang mga mode of verifications, no. Ito yung mga sinasabi, ito yung mga theoretically ito yung mga tinatawag po na ebidensya, no, na ikaw ay nag-perform, no, ng 2021-22 school year, no. At aside from that, madam, no, pagkatapos nito, no, babalik na naman kami, no, by next week, of course, no. Babalik kami dahil June 25, if I'm not mistaken, magisimula, no, under the DO 34, no. Magisimula po yung enrollment, no, for next year,
July
no?
25.
Tapos meron po kaming yes, ma'am.
Tama po, July 25. You're right, sir.
Opo,
Okay,
opo.
so
Yes,
okay.
Tapos marami pa po, no, yung Brigada Eskwela, no, yung Oplan Balik Eskwela, no. Ang dami yun yan. At meron pa yung iniwan po nung nakarang DepEd administration, ano, na napag-usapan din natin nung nakaraan, yung enrichment at remedial classes ng 3 weeks, no, na between July 25 up to August 12, no. So ganyan po yan.
Opo.
Mag-overlap talaga, no, yung ating dalawang school years po, no, ay nag-overlap sa trabaho ng mga
I understand, no, what you're saying, Benjo, but there's other topics that we need to discuss kasi maliban dyan, yung halos wala ng pahinga yung ating mga guro dahil nga kakatapos ng school year, tapos meron kang end of school year activities pa. What is the other concern in terms of, sabihin na, punta na muna tayo dun sa full face-to-face implementation on November 2. Kayo ba, anong position nyo regarding this?
Well, yung face-to-face, no, appreciated naman po namin, no, that the government is now kumbaga may projection na po, no, na mag full face-to-face, no. Tama naman po 'yan. Kailangan naman po natin, ano, kasi yung habang nandito tayo sa online modalities, no, or lalo na sa modular modalities po natin, ano, ay hindi po talaga tayo makakasulong, no, yung education natin hindi natin natitiyak, no. Ang problema lang po namin diyan, no, diyan sa face-to-face classes. In fact, no, sa August 22 opening, ang problema po natin diyan, no, dahil nga ang projection natin ay full face-to-face by November, yung practical po na questions, no. And the practical questions would be yung classrooms natin. Ano? Unang-una po 'yan, ano, yung classroom natin, pag tinignan po natin 'yan, ano, ay kasangkot diyan yung congestion. No, kung meron tayong 15 na bata, no, in average, no, sa kasalukuyan, no, paano natin 'yan pagkakasyahin doon sa ating mga classrooms? No, ngayon ang solution po diyan, no, well, our proposal is of course to lessen, no, the class size, no, to reduce the class size, no, to at least, no, 30 students, no, 30 learners po, no. Pag nag-30 learners po tayo, mangangailangan tayo ng mga bagong classrooms, no? At mangangailangan rin tayo ng mga bagong teachers, no, para mag-serve, no, dito sa mga dito sa
ang tanong,
face-to-face
meron ba
learning,
nun?
no?
May bago ba mga classroom at may bago ba mga guro?
Wala po, no, wala tayong bagong classrooms, wala tayong bagong teachers, no. And of course, no, we are operating, no, under the 2022 budget, no. So kaya nga po ang aming pinopropose po dito, no, kung medyo iuurong natin, ano, yung pasukan, at least 1 month lang naman hinihingi po namin. by mid-September. Kung mid-September po tayo magsisimula nung tinatawag po natin na gradual, no, na papunta ng face-to-face, no, baka January ay face-to-face na po tayo. No, ano bang ibig sabihin? Anong implication ng January? Of course, January is another fiscal year. No, at natapos na yung GAA for 2023 by that time. Ano po, at patutupad na lang natin, ano? Baka at least by January po ay
Magkakaroon
makakakuha
ng
na po
bagong
tayo
budget.
ng bagong mga teachers. Yes, ma'am. At yung classrooms naman ay pwede namang solusyonan. Yan po yung itinulong, yan yung dahilan kung bakit po nagkaroon po tayo nung pilot implementation. Kung natatandaan po ninyo, no, kami po ay nag-support doon sa pilot implementation ng face-to-face, no, noong November 2021. No, at nagkaroon po tayo nung progressive expansion ng face-to-face classes, no, limited, no,
Okay.
noong hanggang nitong June. Marami po tayong natutunan dito, Ms. Pinky, no, marami pong konkreto, no, na mga learnings, no, yung Department of Education po dito, lahat ng field, at marami po yun.
Okay.
At yun po ay makakatulong. Yun po yung gusto namin i-offer, no, sa ating pamunuan ng Department of Education.
Opo.
At sa Malacanang mismo na bagamat
Opo.
hindi tayo nagmamadali, no, bagamat hindi po tayo nagmamadali, at tiyak natin, dalawang bagay po kasi kailangan nating tiyakin. Una, kailangan nating matiyak na yung mga bata ay matututo, yung learning ng mga bata. And pangalawa, kailangan nating matiyak na ligtas yung mga bata, yung mga teacher, at lahat ng sangkot dito po sa face-to-face classes.
Benjo,
Pinaplano
mabilis
po ng
na
ating
tanong, mabilis na sagot din. Magkakaroon ho ba kayo ng dialogue with the Vice President and Education Secretary?
I hope so. Gustong-gusto po namin, ano, pero kahapon may statement naman siya na willing naman po yung ating Secretary VP Sara Duterte na makipag-usap, no, in the spirit of consultation, ano, and open communication po, no. Sana po.
Okay.
Sana po.
Teachers Dignity Coalition Chairperson Benjo Basas, sir, maraming salamat din po sa inyong oras. And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.